The lake where we lost ourselves. You know, there's nothing quite like the feeling of packing up your gear, gathering your closest friends, and heading out for a weekend camping trip. For us, this particular trip was supposed to be just like the others we'd taken before, familiar, relaxing, and fun. We were headed to a lake that we knew like the back of our hands. We had been there so many times that we could practically find our way blindfolded. This time, though, was a little different. We had just finished our classes on a Friday evening, and instead of heading home, we decided to hit the road. 2 cars loaded with everything we'd need for the weekend: tents, food, and enough firewood to last the night. We split into 2 groups, with my car leading the way. Our plan was simple: get to the lake, set up camp, and stay up just long enough to watch the sunrise the next morning. But things didn't go as planned. We got lost. Twice. And here's the weird part: we weren't sure why. The route was ingrained in our minds, but somehow we kept missing turns or feeling like we were driving in circles. The first time, we laughed it off, blaming the late hour or maybe the excitement of getting away from it all. But when it happened again, the laughter started to fade. After the second time, we decided to pull over to check the map. I got out to stretch, expecting to see the other car right behind us, but when I turned around, the road was empty. The car that had been following us was gone. I immediately called my buddy in the car, half-jokingly asking if they decided to ditch us, but his voice on the other end was calm, almost too calm. "We're already at the campsite," he said. I paused, staring at the empty road behind me. "That's impossible," I thought. We were leading, and there was no way he could have passed us. Maybe they had taken a different route, I reasoned. We exchanged our GPS locations to double-check, and that's when I felt a chill creep up my spine. The map showed that we were driving in the completely opposite direction of the lake. How had we managed to get so turned around on a route we knew so well? It didn't make any sense, but at that point, all we could do was turn the car around and follow the GPS back. When we finally reached the lake, it was nearly 10 p.m. What should have been a quick drive had turned into hours of confusion. Exhausted, we unloaded our gear. Some of us decided to have a quick meal and then went to bed, while the rest of us stayed up by the fire, talking and trying to shake off the weirdness of the drive. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows on the trees around us. The few of us who had stayed awake were trying to shake off the unsettling feeling from the drive, but it was hard to ignore. We joked and laughed, but there was an underlying tension that we couldn't quite put our fingers on. The night was eerily quiet, with the occasional rustle of leaves being the only sound apart from our voices. Then, just as we were starting to relax a bit, a scream tore through the silence. We all jumped, hearts pounding. It was coming from one of the tents. We scrambled to our feet and rushed over. Mandy was sitting up in her tent, eyes wide with terror. She was shaking, her voice barely a whisper as she described feeling something or someone grab her leg and pull. Initially, she thought it was one of us messing around, but when she sat up, her hair was suddenly tugged from behind. We exchanged uneasy glances. Mandy was new to the group, and while we all liked to joke around, this didn't feel like the kind of prank any of us would pull, especially not in the middle of the night out here. We tried to comfort her, telling her it was probably just her imagination, or maybe she was half asleep and confused. But the truth was, we were all starting to feel a little on edge. Eventually, those in the tent laid back down, though I doubted anyone would sleep after that. The rest of us returned to the fire, but the mood had shifted. The casual conversations were gone, replaced by uneasy silence. As the fire burned lower, I found myself staring out at the lake, my mind wandering. That's when I saw it, just for a moment, a head bobbing just above the water's surface. I blinked, and it was gone, swallowed by the darkness, and I felt a cold wave of fear wash over me. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice a little too loud in the quiet night. The others followed my gaze but saw nothing. "See what?" one of them asked, but I could tell they were on edge too. I thought I saw someone in the lake." That statement hung in the air like a bad omen. We all stared at the water for a while, but there was nothing, just the still, dark surface reflecting the faint light from our dying fire. The minutes dragged on, and the silence was getting heavier, more oppressive. Then, out of nowhere, we heard it, a snapping sound, like twigs breaking underfoot. It came from the trees behind us. Then, another snap, and another, each one closer than the last. We froze, every instinct telling us not to move, not to make a sound. It felt like we were being watched, like someone was out there just beyond the tree line, waiting. Panic started to set in. No one argued. We were done pretending everything was normal. Whatever was out there, it wasn't something we wanted to stick around and find out. We quickly roused the others, and in a flurry of whispers and hurried movements, we packed up our gear. We didn't care about the time or how tired we were anymore. We just wanted to get out of there. We moved as quickly and quietly as we could, the urgency in our movements fueled by an instinctive fear that we couldn't quite explain. The snapping sounds continued sporadically, always seeming to come from just beyond the reach of our flashlights. It felt as though the darkness itself was alive, watching, waiting for something. As we hurriedly packed up the last of our gear, I couldn't shake the image of that head bobbing in the lake. The rational part of my mind tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light or my imagination running wild, but deep down, I knew I had seen something. The unease gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing minute. We decided to leave the campsite and head back to the cars. No one argued. We all felt that this place wasn't safe. The hike back to the cars felt like it took forever. Every shadow and rustle in the trees sending our nerves into overdrive. When we finally reached the vehicles, we piled in quickly, our earlier excitement replaced by a collective dread. As we started the engines, we double-checked our GPS coordinates. This time, we were taking no chances. We made sure both cars were in sync and agreed to keep each other in sight the entire way back to town. The drive was tense. The road, which we had traveled so many times before, now seemed unfamiliar, twisted in some way we couldn't quite describe. Eventually, the trees began to thin, and the familiar lights of the town appeared in the distance. The relief was palpable. We were back on solid ground, away from whatever had been lurking in the shadows of that lake. A few days later, just as we were starting to put the whole ordeal behind us, we heard the news. The police had discovered a body in the lake, the remains of someone who had been missing for a month. The body had surfaced not far from where we had camped, right around the time we were there. The discovery sent a fresh wave of terror through our group. We had all felt something that night, something dark and sinister lurking just out of sight. And now we knew that whatever it wasn't just in our heads. The Stranger in the Forest. We were just two guys looking for a little adventure, a break from the city, some fresh air, and a few beers under the stars. My buddy Jake and I had been talking about this camping trip for weeks. We finally packed up the RV and headed north, way up into the woods where you couldn't hear anything but the wind and maybe the occasional howl of some distant animal, the kind of place that makes you feel alive. By the time we found our spot, the daylight was fading fast. The shadows of the trees were stretching out longer and longer, and the air was starting to cool down in that way it only does in the deep woods. It was the perfect spot, isolated, quiet, and just remote enough to give you that sense of being miles away from everything. We chose the RV for this trip because, well, let's be honest, Jake and I aren't exactly the roughing it types. Sure, we like the idea of camping, but after a long day of driving, the thought of crawling into a tent just didn't appeal. Plus, with the RV, we had all the comforts that we could want right there. A warm bed, a roof over our heads, and a solid lock on the door. We parked the RV next to a little clearing, right by this small, quiet lake. The whole place had this eerie calm about it, the kind of quiet that makes you almost hold your breath so you don't break the silence. We set up a fire just outside the RV, gathered some wood, and before long we had a nice little blaze going. The warmth of the flames, the cool air night, the smell of pine, it was everything we'd been looking forward to. We sat there, just shooting the breeze, talking about everything and nothing, watching the fire dance and crackle. After a long day of driving, it felt like heaven. The beers kept flowing, and after a while, we were both pretty buzzed. Jake was telling some wild story, something about a ghost town he visited as a kid, but honestly, I was only half listening. My mind kept drifting off, lost in the firelight, in the quiet of the forest around us. There's something about being out in the woods at night. It's peaceful, sure, but it's also got this, edge to it. Like you're not really alone, even when you know you are. Eventually the fire started to die down and the chill of the night crept in. We were both tired, the kind of tired that comes from a day well spent. Jake stood up, swaying a bit, and stumbled toward the RV. "Time to hit the sack," he mumbled, and I nodded, watching him disappear inside. After Jake got into the RV, I took a moment to put out the fire, carefully smothering the embers until there was nothing but a faint glow left. The night had fully settled in by then, the kind of darkness that presses in on you, making you aware of every little sound. The crackle of the last few burning twigs, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, it all felt amplified in the stillness of the forest. As I turned to head back to the RV, I suddenly heard it, the sound of footsteps crunching through the underbrush, not too far behind me. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. I wasn't exactly sober, but I knew what I heard. Slowly, I turned around, half expecting to see Jake playing some kind of joke, but there was nothing. Just the trees standing silent and tall, their shadows blending into the darkness. I stood there for a few seconds, straining my ears, but the footsteps were gone. Just the wind now. I thought, trying to brush it off as my imagination getting the better of me, I was probably just tired, and the beers weren't helping. With a nervous chuckle, I shook my head and headed back into the RV. Jake was already sprawled out on one of the beds, out cold. Typical, I thought, as I made my way to the small bathroom at the back of the RV. That's when I felt it, a slight but unmistakable shake, like someone or something was pushing against the RV. I froze again, my hand hovering over the bathroom door handle. Then it happened again, but this time stronger, followed by a loud pounding on the door. My heart raced, and I crept over to the window beside the door and carefully peeked out, my breath catching in my throat. Standing there, just outside, was a man. His clothes were drenched, his hair plastered to his head, and his breath was raged like he'd just run a marathon. But it was his eyes that got me. Wide, almost wild, darting around as if he was being hunted. He saw me and stepped closer, his voice low but urgent. "You need to leave, now!" I didn't move, didn't say a word. My mind was racing, trying to process what the hell was happening. Who was this guy? And why was he out here in the middle of nowhere, looking like he had just crawled out of a lake? But he didn't wait for me to respond. He stepped closer to the door, his voice rising in panic. "There's something out here. It was chasing me. If you don't get out of here, it's going to come after you too." My gut told me to believe him, but my brain was still trying to catch up. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to stammer out. But he just shook his head, eyes flicking over his shoulder like he expected something to burst out of the woods at any second. I stood there, frozen, staring at this wild-eyed man as he kept insisting we leave. But the words were stuck in my throat, and all I could do was nod slightly, trying to make sense of everything. His urgency was contagious. It was like the fear in his eyes was seeping into me, crawling under my skin. Finally, he seemed to realize I wasn't going to budge, at least not right away. He let out a frustrated breath and asked, almost desperately, "Is there anyone else around here? Anyone I need to warn?" His eyes were scanning the area, searching the shadows like they might hold some hidden danger. I shook my head, too stunned to speak. He gave me one last hard look and then turned and disappeared back into the woods, his footsteps quickly swallowed by the darkness. I just stood there, staring after him, trying to wrap my mind around what just happened. My gut was screaming at me that something was very wrong, but what was I supposed to do? Wake Jake up and tell him we needed to drive out of there in the middle of the night because some soaked stranger told me to? After what felt like an eternity, I finally moved, my legs stiff and unsteady. I locked the door, checked it twice, and then collapsed onto the bed opposite Jake's. But sleep wasn't coming anytime soon. I lay there, staring at the ceiling. Every creak and rustle outside sounded like a threat, my mind racing with all the possibilities of what could be out there. The man's warning echoed in my head, over and over as the hours dragged on. I wanted to believe it was just some drunk or crazy guy, but deep down, I knew there was something more to it. And that's what kept me wide awake, heart pounding, until the first light of dawn finally broke. Morning came like a lifeline, the weak sunlight filtering through the curtains finally breaking the tension that had held me captive all night. I must have dozed off at some point, but a sharp, incessant knock at the door jolted me awake. Jake stirred too, rubbing his eyes as he sat up, looking just as groggy and confused as I felt. I opened the door to find a man in his 40s, dressed in ranger gear, standing there with a serious expression. "You two need to get out of here now," he said urgently. My heart skipped a beat as I noticed the look of unease on his face. He quickly explained that a body had been found not far from our RV earlier that morning. The man had been attacked by some animal, likely a few days ago. While he was camping during a heavy rainstorm, the ranger's words hit me like a punch to the gut. A cold shiver ran down my spine as my mind raced with a terrifying question I couldn't shake about the man who had knocked on our door last night. The thought stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind, and I knew it was something that would haunt me long after we left those woods. The haunted GPS. I was driving late at night, the road ahead barely visible under the dim glow of my headlights. I wasn't familiar with the area, so I had the GPS guiding me. It was supposed to be a straightforward drive, just another trip to clear my head, but as I cruised down the empty highway, something strange happened. The GPS, which had been calmly giving directions, suddenly recalculated the route. "Turn left to meet your fate," the voice said, breaking the monotony. I blinked. Sure, I hadn't heard it right, but the screen confirmed it. An arrow pointing left down a narrow, unmarked road. I hesitated, my hands tightening on the wheel. This wasn't right. It had to be a glitch, some weird error. But as I drove on, the voice returned, more insistent. "In 300 meters, face your regrets." A shiver crawled up my spine. The road ahead seemed to stretch into nothingness, the darkness pressing in, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being led somewhere specific, somewhere important. "Destination Oblivion," the GPS concluded, and I found myself in front of my old high school. The building loomed in the darkness, its silhouette unchanged by the years. I pulled up to the gate and stopped, the engine idling as I stared at the place that had once been so central to my life. Memories flooded back. Those carefree days spent with friends, the excitement of plans and dreams that felt so real back then. I could almost hear the echoes of laughter, the shouts from the football field, the bell ringing to signal the end of another day. For a brief moment, I felt a smile tugging at my lips, but it didn't last. Along with the warmth of those memories came a pang of guilt. I hadn't been back here in years, not since everything changed. The friendships that faded, the dreams that were never realized, all because of that one night I'd rather forget. The GPS's voice broke through my thoughts, calm and unyielding. "Continue your path." I gripped the steering wheel, taking one last look at the school, and drove away, the warmth in my chest quickly cooling into a familiar, uncomfortable weight. The GPS continued to guide me down increasingly unfamiliar roads. The houses became sparser, the streetlights more distant, until I was driving through a rural area, the kind where the darkness seemed to swallow everything around you. Eventually, the GPS led me to a stretch of road that looked utterly ordinary, just another nondescript turn off the highway. But as I slowed down, recognition hit me like a punch to the gut. This was the place, the site of the accident. I hadn't been back here since that night. I'd always avoided it, taking longer routes just to keep the memories buried. But now, here I was, parked on the very spot where everything had gone wrong. It was late, and I'd been driving too fast, too angry, too distracted. The argument replayed in my mind, sharp words exchanged, the frustration, the decisions to leave in a fit of rage, and then the swerve, the impact, the silence that followed. I gripped the steering wheel, trying to keep the flood of emotions at bay. The GPS was silent now, as if waiting for me to make sense of what I was feeling. But there was no sense to be made. Just the cold, hard fact that my recklessness had cost a life, my friend's life. I stared out at the road, the scene replaying over and over in my mind. The screech of tires, the shattering of glass, the awful, final stillness that followed. My breath caught in my throat, and for a moment, it felt like I was right back there, trapped in that moment of horror and regret. But the GPS wasn't done with me yet. The screen flickered and the voice returned softer this time, almost sorrowful. "Face what you've become." I closed my eyes, the weight of the guilt almost unbearable. I didn't want to face it. I hadn't wanted to for years, but I knew I couldn't keep running from it either. Not anymore. Taking a deep breath, I put the car back in gear and drove away. the memories clinging to me like a shadow that wouldn't let go. The GPS guided me down one last stretch of road, leading me to a small cemetery just outside of town. The engine hummed quietly as I parked the car. I didn't need to check the screen to know where I was. This place had haunted my thoughts for years. I stepped out of the car, the cold night air biting through my jacket as I walked toward the familiar grave. My footsteps felt heavy, as if each one was a struggle against the pull of everything I'd been avoiding for so long. When I reached the grave, I paused, staring at the simple headstone that bore my friend's name. The memories of that night came rushing back, clearer and more painful than ever before. The guilt, the regret, the endless what-ifs, they all came crashing down like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I knelt down, the grass soaking through my jeans as I placed a trembling hand on the stone. For the first time, I allowed myself to really feel the weight of my guilt. "I am sorry," I whispered, my voice cracking. The words felt inadequate, but they were all I had left. I'd spent so long running from this moment, but now that I was here, I realized there was no escape. Tears blurred my vision as I spoke to the empty air, as if my friend could somehow hear me. "I never meant for any of this to happen," I choked out. "I don't even know if I could ever forgive myself, but I promise I won't run anymore." The air around me seemed to grow colder, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing beside the grave, a fleeting, ghostly image of my friend. But there was no anger in their face, only a profound sadness, a sadness that mirrored my own regret and sorrow. I blinked, and they were gone, leaving me alone with my remorse. I took a deep breath, shuddering breath. The weight on my chest had eased just a little. I knew then that this wasn't just about seeking forgiveness from them. It was about finding a way to forgive myself. I stood up, wiping the tears from my eyes. As I walked back to the car, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. It was as if the world itself was telling me that it was time to move forward. It wasn't redemption, but it was a start, a chance to begin again. I got back in my car, my mind clearer, but my heart still heavy. The GPS screen flickered one last time, displaying a simple message: "The journey continues." As I drove away, the road ahead was no longer shrouded in darkness. Maybe now I could begin to heal. But there was one more step I needed to take. A few days later, I found myself standing at the doorstep of my friend's family home. It was a place I hadn't visited since the accident, a place filled with memories of laughter and shared moments. My hand shook as I knocked on the door, unsure of what to expect. The door opened, and there stood my friend's mother, her eyes widening in surprise at the sight of me. For a moment we just stood there, the silence heavy with unspoken words. Then, to my surprise, she stepped forward and pulled me into a hug. We sat down together in the living room, and I shared everything: my pain, my sorrow, my struggle to come to terms with what had happened. She listened, her expression soft but sad, and when I was finished, she placed her hand on mine. "We've all been hurting," she said quietly, "but you need to know that we don't blame you. We've missed you." Her words were a balm to my soul, and for the first time since the accident, I felt a true sense of peace as I left their home that day. I knew the road ahead was still long, but I wasn't walking it alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The last service station. The road ahead seemed to stretch forever into the darkness, an endless black ribbon that was starting to mess with my mind. My eyes flicked to the fuel gauge, nearly empty. Just great. The hum of the engine and the faint crackle of static on the radio were my only companions as I drove through the night, fatigue clawing at my senses. Then, out of nowhere, a flicker of light appeared in the distance. I squinted, my heart lifting slightly at the sight. A service station. Finally. I was running on fumes and needed a break, desperately. Maybe some coffee to keep me awake for the rest of the drive. I pulled into the station, the gravel crunching under my tires. It was an old place, with faded signs and a weak flickering light in the windows. I stepped out of the car, and that's when it hit me. The silence. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Just a heavy, suffocating stillness. Something about this place felt wrong, but I was too tired to care. I needed gas and a few minutes to gather myself. I walked toward the entrance, trying to shake off the feeling that something was very off. The door creaked as I pushed it open, stepping into the dimly lit interior. The smell of stale coffee hit me first, followed by the sight of the cashier behind the counter. He looked up as I entered, but there was something odd about him. His movements were too stiff, his expressions too blank. I nodded, giving him a quick, polite smile before heading to the coffee machine. As I poured a cup, I could feel his eyes on me, and when I glanced back, he was still staring, unblinking. "You should stay until sunrise," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. I blinked, caught off guard by the sudden comment. "What?" I asked, not sure if I heard him right. "Stay until sunrise," he repeated. "It's safer here." My skin crawled, but I forced a chuckle, trying to shake off the unease. "Thanks, but I'm here for some gas and coffee," I replied, trying to sound casual. He didn't respond, just kept staring as I paid for the coffee and moved towards the door, my unease growing with every step. As I reached for the handle, another voice came from behind me, this time a woman's. "He's right, you should stay." I turned to see a woman standing in the aisle, her face partially obscured by shadows. Her voice was soft, almost pleading, but it sent a shiver down my spine. "Look, I just need to fill up my tank and get back on the road," I said, trying to ignore the rising panic in my chest. But as I stepped outside, the strangeness of the place seemed to tighten its grip. The clocks behind the counter caught my eye. They were all moving backward, the hands ticking away in reverse. I froze, my heart pounding as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was I hallucinating? Maybe I was more tired than I thought. And then I saw it. A dark, thick liquid began to seep down the walls, pooling on the floor. I stumbled back, my mind struggling to process the sight. Was that blood? It couldn't be. This had to be some kind of nightmare, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't wake up. The walls were bleeding, and not just a trickle. Rivulets of the dark substance oozed from cracks and seams, staining the faded wallpaper, pooling on the floor. My heart raced as I backed away, nearly slipping in the growing puddle of blood. Panic surged through me, every instinct screaming at me to get out. But when I looked at the door, it was no longer there. In its place was a solid wall, as if the exit had never existed. I turned, desperate to find another way out, but the service station was changing around me. The walls seemed to pulse, breathing in and out like a living organism. The ceiling started to close in, the lights flickering erratically, casting long, twisted shadows that danced across the floor. The cashier was still watching me, but his face was no longer clear. His features were melting, blurring together in a grotesque mask of flesh and shadow. The woman was the same, her form distorting like a reflection in a funhouse mirror. They weren't human anymore, if they ever were. The walls around them seemed to pulse with life, the bleeding growing more intense, more violent. The smell hit me next, a thick, metallic scent that filled my nostrils, making me gag. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world around me was unraveling. I backed away, but my feet felt heavy, as if the ground itself was trying to hold me in place. The floor beneath me was slick with blood, making every step a struggle. My heart raced, my pulse pounding in my ears as the reality of my situation sank in. I was trapped in a place that defied all logic, all reason. The radio behind the counter crackled to life, a distorted voice breaking through the static. "You're not here," the voice whispered. "You're somewhere else, somewhere between." I spun around, searching for the source of the voice, but there was no one there. My mind raced, piecing together fragments of memory. Headlights, the screech of tires, the deafening crunch of metal, a car accident. My car accident. Suddenly everything made sense. This place, this impossible, nightmarish service station wasn't real. It couldn't be. It was a construct, a twisted reflection of my own mind. I was in a coma, teetering on the edge between life and death, and this place was the last stop before the end. The cashier stepped forward, his movements jerky and unnatural. "You have a choice," he said, his voice echoing in my head. "Stay here or go back. But if you stay, you must wait until sunrise." I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. "I don't want to stay here," I whispered, fear and desperation clawing at my chest. "I want to go back. I want to live." The walls seemed to pulse, the bleeding growing more intense, the faces of the staff now nothing but smears of color and shadow. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memories of my life, my family, my friends, the things I hadn't done yet, the people I hadn't said goodbye to. I couldn't let this be the end. "I choose to go back," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "I choose to wake up." The ground beneath me shuddered, the station dissolving into darkness, the sounds of the world fading away until there was nothing, just silence. And then, light. Blinding, searing light. I gasped, my lungs filling with air as if for the first time. I opened my eyes, blinking against the harsh white of the hospital room. My heart raced as I took in the sterile surroundings, the beeping monitors, the IV in my arm, the familiar faces around me. My family. They were here, tears in their eyes, relief written across their faces. I tried to speak, my voice barely a croak. "How long?" I managed to ask. My mother stepped forward, her hand trembling as she brushed the hair from my forehead. "You've been in a coma for 6 months," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "We thought we lost you." I closed my eyes, the weight of everything settling on me. 6 months. 6 months trapped in that place, on the edge of oblivion. But I was back. I had chosen to come back. I was alive. And as I lay there, surrounded by the people I loved, I knew I had made the right choice. The night vision. I've always enjoyed night drives. There's something calming about the empty roads, the way the darkness wraps around you like a blanket. That night was no different, or so I thought. I'd just installed this new high-tech dashboard camera in my car. It had all the bells and whistles, including a night vision mode. I wasn't planning to use it, but I couldn't resist checking out how it worked. I mean, who wouldn't be curious? The road was deserted, just an endless ribbon of asphalt cutting through the night. The occasional flicker of my headlights bouncing off the road signs was the only movement in sight. It was peaceful, almost hypnotic. But then, as I fiddled with the camera, something strange happened. I must have accidentally switched on the night vision. Suddenly, the world in front of me changed. The trees lining the road, the pavement itself, everything was bathed in this eerie green hue. But that wasn't what caught my attention. No, it was the faint figure standing in the middle of the road up ahead. I slammed on the brakes, heart pounding in my chest. But when I looked up through the windshield, nothing. The road was empty. I took a deep breath, chalking it up to a trick of the light or maybe my tired eyes playing games with me. But just to be sure, I flipped the camera back to normal mode. The figure was gone. I shook my head, laughed nervously to myself, and continued driving. But the unease lingered, like a shadow that wouldn't leave. A few miles later, curiosity got the better of me. I turned the night vision back on. Big mistake. At first, everything seemed normal again, just that green-tinged world. But then, there it was, another figure, this time at the side of the road. My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell if it was a person or something else entirely. It stood motionless, its features obscured by the night vision's distortion. I felt a chill run down my spine. I slowed down, trying to get a better look, but as I drew closer, it faded away into the darkness. I quickly switched the camera back to normal. Nothing there. Just the empty road. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter, knuckles white with fear. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't figure out what. I pressed on, telling myself it was all in my head. But as I kept driving, more of these figures began to appear. They weren't always on the road. Some were in the trees, others were in the fields that lined the highway. All of them were just standing there, watching, waiting. My pulse quickened with every mile, the air in the car growing thick with tension. They were getting closer, inching towards the road, towards me. It felt like I was being herded, like they were trying to surround me. I couldn't stop. I didn't dare stop. Something told me that if I did, they'd reach me. That's when it hit me. These things, these entities, they weren't random. They were all around me, all the time. The night vision wasn't creating them, it was revealing them. They were there, in the darkness, hidden from sight, but not from the camera. And they were closing in. Panic set in. My heart was racing, my breath coming in short, frantic gasps. I tried to turn off the night vision, but the button wouldn't work. It was stuck, jammed, or maybe it was something else, something keeping me from shutting it off. My mind raced. What were they? Ghosts? Spirits? And why could I only see them through the camera? I realized that they weren't just passively watching, they were drawn to me, to the car's headlights like moths to the flame. The more I drove, the more of them appeared, as if they were converging on the only source of light in the dark world. They were souls, lost, trapped in some kind of parallel dimension, and my car was like a beacon, pulling them out of the shadows. But if they got too close, if they touched the car, I didn't want to think about what could happen. I had to get the night vision off, had to break whatever connection was pulling them toward me. But how? I couldn't stop, couldn't pull over. They were too close now, nearly on top of me. I had to keep moving, had to outrun them somehow. I was driving faster now, the car hurtling down the road, the figures on the night vision screen growing more numerous, more defined. They were no longer just distant shadows. They were faces, eyes, hollow and empty, locked onto me with a hunger that I could feel in my bones. I was frantically pressing the buttons on the camera, trying everything to shut it off. Nothing worked. It was like the camera was locked in that mode, forcing me to see them, forcing me to acknowledge their presence. They were getting closer. Too close, almost brushing against the car as I sped by. Their hands reached out as if to grab the car, to pull me into their world. My mind raced, trying to focus on anything but the terror clawing at my throat. The road ahead was just a blur now. The speedometer climbed higher as I pushed the car to its limits. But no matter how fast I went, they kept up, kept closing in. Then, in a moment of clarity, I realized something. The camera was feeding them, giving them a link to this world, to me. If I could turn off the night vision, I had to kill the source of the light that was drawing them in, the camera itself. With trembling hands, I reached up, fumbling for the cable that powered the dashboard camera. The car jolted as I swerved to avoid another figure that had appeared directly in front of me, but I managed to keep control, my eyes darting between the road and the screen, where the entities were now so close I could almost feel their icy breath. I yanked the cable out with all my strength, the camera flickering for a split second before the screen went black. Instantly, the world around me plunged into darkness. No more night vision. No more eerie green glow, just the blackness of the night. For a moment, I thought it was over, that I was safe. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw something move. Just a flicker of a shadow, a shape in the darkness that wasn't there before. My heart skipped a beat as I realized that while the camera was off, they were still out there, somewhere, lurking in the shadows. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. I kept driving, hoping that by severing the connection, I'd left them behind. The road was a blur, the lines and signs flashing past as I sped toward the faint glow of a distant town. Safety. I had to believe I was heading towards safety. It felt like hours, but it was probably just minutes before I finally saw the lights of the town up ahead. I slowed down, still, heart pounding in my chest, the adrenaline refusing to fade. The town was small, quiet, but it felt like a sanctuary, a place where the darkness couldn't reach me. I pulled over at the first gas station I saw, hands still shaking as I put the car into park. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside of me, but the fear lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I glanced at the now dead dashboard camera, half expecting it to spring back to life, but it remained dark, lifeless. Was it really over? Had I escaped? Or were they just still out there, waiting for me to make one wrong move, to flick that switch back on? I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to find out. But one thing's for sure, I'll never turn that night vision on again, because some things are better left unseen, hidden in the darkness where they belong.